Uh, so I know that you have traveled. I didn't realize it was 42 countries. I knew it was travel that you traveled quite a bit, and you speak lots of different languages. But I was just wondering how, as an educator, either how or if you connected with other educational institutions in your travel, or was it just for, like, was it?
How does that look there?
Fine.
You can see, hopefully, I should. Okay. So this is an opportunity on the morning of Thursday, March 20th. This is an opportunity for educators to get to know 21st, March 21st. Part of my story, March is a very important, integral month. So this is a very serendipitous and auspicious meeting that I welcome, because I don't always get the opportunity to speak with you, Dr. Gilliam. So as you see, I set up the cameras and all of that to capture this moment. But we were talking about travel, and you asked me about what my reasons for travel were. If they were for personal reasons, for travel for leisure, or if I had professional reasons. To answer that question, I think that as a Black man, I didn't find it that I had the luxury of traveling for leisure. One, I didn't have the money to just travel for leisure, because when I traveled, I didn't stay in hotels usually. I had to do a lot of backpacking. So my purpose for travel was based upon the belief and the principle that it would enrich my life, seeing locations, learning history, learning the cultures, learning the languages of these places that I traveled to. For instance, when I moved to South Korea to be an educator, it was because I needed to work. It was because I couldn't find a job that would provide me, I guess, with a living wage, and that would put me in a position of gainful employment that would lead to a career right here in Los Angeles, my hometown. I didn't find an opportunity like that until I moved to South Korea, where they provided me with an apartment, which was free, a decent salaried position, and job security. I had the job for a whole year without being stressed about, much else. So my intention was to, of course, because I was immersed in Korean culture, I saw it as an opportunity to learn their language, their culture, and other things. Even though in Los Angeles, I had already learned their martial art of Taekwondo. So I was, I guess, acculturated into their culture already. I had heard the language so much so that there were a number of phrases that I could produce, if I needed to. So I was comfortable with the language. But in my travel to Korea, although it was for work purposes and to earn money, I was also there because I wanted to learn the language, perhaps study their martial art even deeper. And I also saw it as an opportunity, maybe even to grow a family, get married and settle there. Again, my purpose was not to go there. Now, contrast my experience with my white colleagues. Their ideal was, we're here to work, we're here to, I guess, enculturate or, enculturate the native Korean. Okay, we're here to sort of civilize them, give them this language, this Western language. This was an ideal that I came away with. And so oftentimes my white colleagues were not interested in learning the Korean language, not interested in the Korean culture. They were there to give a better culture, a better language to these people. Now, I'm only saying, I only said, I'm only using the terminology sort of to tame the savage and the native in this terminology that we're used to from the colonial, history, from Columbus and the natives. Koreans are not savages, are not, natives. They're native in their own land, but the Koreans are highly sophisticated. Their culture, their country is known, their economy has been called the miracle economy for the vast advancements that were made within 30 years to where it is today. And basically all of the technology that we use in America is based upon the ingenuity or the production and manufacture of the technology in Korea. So we are very much subservient or reliant upon their advancements. Not biotechnology, but I think semiconductors is what I'm referring to. So anyhow, I traveled, but it wasn't for leisure. It was because, because I had to work, but also I saw myself as having an opportunity to learn the culture, learn the language, learn more, and which I did. And I wanted to contrast that with my white counterparts who were not interested in learning the culture or the history. They were there to work, earn money. For them, it was a gap year in some cases, or it was their career. We are educators, and we are not to sort of fraternize with the locals. We are administering, something in a professional manner. I don't know. That's so. I knew that when I moved to Korea that it was an opportunity for me to travel, and I tried to travel, but I was a novice at it. My sister was older, more mature, and had other opportunities to travel. I had the desire, but I didn't have the know-how. So it took me a number of years to do this. Contrast that with many of my colleagues and folks who were working alongside me in Korea, young as I was at the time, and even younger. They had the means. They had better jobs than I did, higher pay, better apartments. And so within the first year of their arrival in Korea, they had taken a jaunt or taken a trip to some other Southeast Asian countries like it was no problem for them. I was a novice, I didn't know, so it was very gradual. I had my ideals about other countries, and I had heard horror stories, and so I was nervous about solo travel. However, 9 years passed, maybe 7 years passed while I was in Korea, over which time I only traveled from Korea back to America, back to my home right here in Los Angeles. I traveled to Japan, and I traveled to Taiwan. 3 countries: Taiwan, Korea, and America and Japan. 4 countries, including my homeland. Over 7 years. 4 countries in 7 years is a terrible travel record if you're a solo traveler. So I had aspirations of going outside that, but what happened is 2015 was a pivotal year because I was hired in Peru. And when I traveled to Peru, it was the first time ever traveling to South America for me. The first time going to a Spanish-speaking country. Although I began learning Spanish in the 3rd grade, at a private school in Los Angeles with my sister. Although we had learned Spanish, I had never been in an environment, I was never immersed in Spanish, so I had to rely upon that knowledge. And that was a watershed moment. That was, oh my gosh, I can literally say, or I can function in this land. I'm not, and I could contrast that with Korea, where I had to struggle with the language. It was vastly different from English, and I didn't have the foundation in Korean that I have in Spanish. So traveling to Peru in 2015 for work let me know that I could spend 10, 15, 20 years studying Korean and not progress as quickly as I can in Spanish because of the foundation that I already had, but also because the language is closer related.
More similar.
Okay. And so these are the things that that happened. Now in Korea, I didn't have enough money to travel, and I was juggling credit card bills. I was really trying to get back to my lifestyle in America. I thought Korea was going to be a catapult forward, and in a very real sense, there were things about my experience. There were rewards, from cultural rewards to having lived in the country, traveled, that are extremely valuable, but financially, it was rough. I didn't have a savings. I had a pension. I had my salary. Well, the cost of living in Korea was rising, and my salary was basically stagnant. And there were very few opportunities that I could find to grow my salary. So it was a challenge. But when I arrived in Saudi Arabia, because I parlayed my experience, my nearly decades-long experience in Korea, into a position in Saudi Arabia.
So wait, so you went from Korea to Saudi Arabia?
Right.
And then to Peru?
No. All right, so in Korea, I stayed for 9 years. But after 7 years in Korea, I moved, I didn't move, but I had a summer position in Peru in 2015. After Peru, the 2-week summer experience, I returned to Korea. So for the next 2 years in Korea, after that Peruvian experience, I began to apply for other positions.
Got it.
Because I had conquered Peru, which I didn't expect, but it was like, there's more to the world, there's more. I felt that Korea, my job in Korea was my saving grace. And I just had to appreciate what I had and stick with it, because I didn't see any other options. When Peru came around, I thought maybe there's more. And I had friends who were moving around as well. I didn't want to jump from one position to the other and be at a loss at any time and say, I wanted a consistent career. I wanted a stable history, job history, because in Korea, it's quite competitive. And when they look for candidates, they want to know that you're committed to life in Korea, that you can stay, that you're not going to skip out on them within 6 months or a year. They want you to stay. And so I showed them my commitment and investment in Korea by showing them I speak your language, I have no problem eating your food, living in your country, and I've done this year in and year out, hire me. And they oftentimes they had reservations because of,
Right.
and so that made me nervous. And so, yes, I didn't find that I had the luxury to just jump from job to job. I didn't have the luxury to waste time or even enjoy my time much and travel as much as my white counterparts who took advantage of those those things.
Okay, so sorry, I just wanted to get the timeline straight. So then you started telling me about Saudi Arabia.
So Korea for 9 years. During that time, I had a position in Peru. After Korea, I parlayed my experience. I had a nice resume into applying for Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia hired me. It took me about 3 years. I was applying off and on to different companies. So that made me even more nervous about leaving Korea, because I thought, I've invested so much, they keep renewing my contract, I should stay. But when I eventually did get a confirmation that I did have a job in Saudi Arabia, I took my time not to just up and leave. I went through a lot of paperwork and what have you. But I made sure I was secure in my next position before I left Korea. So I got to Saudi Arabia. I was working for a company from Virginia, the Hamptons, I believe. It's a company called Blue Force, still in existence, military contractor. And the position was as an English teacher in Saudi Arabia. Now, all of this time, all of my work experience has been teaching English, conversational English. In Korea, anyone who has a college degree and whose first language is English or is a native English speaker will get hired in Korea doing just that as an English teacher. Many different levels. When I was in Korea, the highest position I held was a university professor, a university assistant professor in Korea. So I matriculated through their job market. I went from an after-school teacher for the elementary to a elementary school, public school teacher to a university instructor, and then to a university assistant professor. Not at the same institutions. So that's what happened. But after that, after all of that time, I didn't know it, but I was primed. I was ready to leave Korea. So when I got to Saudi Arabia, it was a new experience. I welcomed it, and as a black man, I needed it. I needed that.
Hi.
My then girlfriend, the culture told me I need to change in Korea. This was the message that I was getting in Korea. You need to conform, you need to change. When I got to Saudi Arabia, it was more so, you are fine the way that you are. Let yourself, simply be. For instance, shaving was a habit that I kept up when I was in South Korea. My girlfriend told me not only did I need to shave, but she would also pluck the ingrown hairs, folliculitis, folliculae barbae, ingrown hairs, bumps, razor bumps. She would meticulously pluck the ingrown hairs. She said that there was too much work for her to do, so she suggested that I have laser surgery to remove my beard. I was reluctant to accept this, but it was an ongoing argument between us. No, you'll look better, you're gonna look cleaner, you're gonna look lighter, and all of this. And me not having knowledge of self, lacking a strong understanding of my rich, Africanity, African history and lineage and connections to Africa and to powerful black men and women of all of the diaspora. I lacked the confidence to say, she's wrong, I don't need to listen, this is just ridiculous. Okay, I don't need to change, I'm fine as I am. Okay, so when I got to Saudi Arabia and I saw men with beards, which was basically a no-no in South Korea, because South Koreans, I think genetically, there aren't many, facial hair is not prominent in their society. If you will.
Is it genetics or is it a product of culture?
I think that culturally, a shaven face is one thing, but I think genetics plays a role because Here's one genetic difference that I learned while I was in Korea. My girlfriend told me that Koreans don't produce earwax, brown, sticky earwax the way that others do. A white powdery substance is produced in their ears. Okay. I heard it from her. I've heard it from another source. So this whole genetic difference. Oh, and also Koreans didn't wear deodorant. You know, again, it's a cultural thing, but I think there might be some, you know, genetic things going on there too. So I'm not a geneticist, and I'm not gonna try to be. Whether it's a wives' tale, old wives' tale, or if it's true, I think that the white powder in the ear is true. I think I had some evidence. She might have shown me something like that. Are you Googling it?
I am. Dry earwax, typical in East Asians and Native Americans, is light colored and flaky.
That part.
This is from Science News.
That part. So, so I was, you know, I studied martial arts, Taekwondo, and one of the challenges for me was to conform to the way that my instructors did their movements. And it took me some time to realize, oh, their hips are not as, you know, there's not as much muscle, you know, around the hips, around the buttocks region. Their bodies are different from mine. So while it's easy for them to sit on their feet or sit Indian style and sit in these different positions, for them it's easy. For me, it was painful because my body is constructed differently. That's when I realized I'm trying to be like them, whereas I need to find my, I don't know, homeostasis, my equilibrium. I need to find what is right for me. And so I found something that was right for me in Saudi Arabia because I didn't have to shave any longer. And that was a blessing because I was dealing with, you know, my skin. And I underwent laser surgery after the suggestion of my girlfriend. She suggested, I have video footage of this. She told me, essentially she was saying, you're too dark. You're too dark and you need to lighten and be lighter. You will be more, we will accept you more if you are lighter. And that's coming from your girlfriend, you know? That was the message that she was giving me. And I was like, at the time I said, I fought it because I don't like surgeries at all. I had braces when I was in high school, and I had LASIK surgery when I was in 2005. That's about as far of cosmetic changes that I'm gonna go through. I used to have my hair cut, but I would often get cut when they would try to line me up to give me this perfect edge. So I'm very comfortable with my natural, the way that I am. When I was in high school, I was following others and trying to process my hair, put the conch on like Malcolm X, and I had a phase. I did that, and but I'm very comfortable with the sort of a natural Rastafarian, you know, approach. You know, let the or Muslim Islam, you know, let the beard grow, let your hair grow naturally, you know. So, but Saudi Arabia was good for me in that sense. So, and the money, we were paid tax-free dollars, and so that increased our income, you know, our gross income, and that increased our net income. We weren't being taxed, so that allowed me to travel because I was making so much more than I was making in Korea. I thought, I have a buddy, Big Mike. Big Mike and I worked in Saudi Arabia. He lives now in California here with me. We've been doing the podcast together, podcasting. Big Mike will tell you, I mean, I'll tell you too, I did not know how much of a salary difference it would be when I moved to Saudi Arabia. I thought I was going to get maybe $1,000 more. And I welcomed that money and change of scenery, but I was getting maybe $4,000 more than I was making in South Korea. And when I met Big Mike, I told him, I'm just happy to be out of Korea and to get X number of dollars, I told him. And he said, what? You're not getting paid X number of dollars. You're getting paid this. He said, you flew all the way over here across the globe and you didn't know how much you were making? He said, look, brother, you can think you can make that and all the rest of the money, you just give it to me, think you're making that. So, yeah,
So from Saudi Arabia, tell me about, because you said you've traveled to how many different countries?
So when I left Korea, I looked back at that time and said, I wasted too much time. I didn't travel enough. I'm never gonna let that happen again. I'm not gonna let time pass where I don't travel.
Okay.
Because up until the time when I arrived in Saudi Arabia, now I had been to South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Peru. I put a trip to the Philippines in there. That's 5 countries. I had a layover in Panama and another layover in Canada. So there I was looking at 7 countries in that 1 year. That was unheard of for me over the 9 years that I lived in Korea. I did 7 countries in 2015, and I thought, I like this. I want more of this. Let's do this. So when I got to Saudi Arabia, I was geographically situated where I could easily access Europe, Asia, and Africa for a cheap ticket within a flight distance of maybe 4 hours. 4-hour flight, I could get to any number of countries. And so I didn't want to regret the time. I didn't want to lose any time. So I said, I'm going to travel. So every opportunity that I got in Saudi Arabia, I took it and I traveled. So in 2017, I traveled to 17 countries. It also helped that Saudi Arabia was quite boring and quite undesirable. They gave me a beautiful home, but I don't want to stay in a room. I don't want to be confined to a nice home and watch life play out on a television. I've seen too many black men in America, in my family, sit in front of televisions and watch life pass them by. There's a very poignant scene in the movie Juice, starring Tupac Shakur, Omar Epps, and those other brothers. Reginald Hudlin, I think, is the director. In that movie, Tupac's father is sitting in front of a television. He's in a comatose sort of, non-emotional state where he's just staring at the television. And maybe he was in the Vietnam War. Maybe something has happened to him. And Tupac slides a few bucks into his shirt pocket or something like that. And I saw that and I just thought, man, how many black men are just watching their lives or watching life pass them by, staring at screens? And that haunts me. So, and my dad has a small television, then it got larger, then it got bigger and bigger. So his thing is to get bigger televisions. And I tell him, come on, Dad, you got to travel. But he's like, nah, son. There are trade-offs, there are sacrifices we have to make. So I think that perhaps that's a sacrifice that he's making so that I can, live my life. But being in Saudi Arabia, I didn't want to stay put. And so every opportunity, if they gave us a 3-day weekend, the 3-day weekend, it was unexpected. They announced it on a Thursday. Gentlemen, you're gonna have a 3-day weekend. It was just before Christmas. Enjoy yourselves. I booked a flight from Saudi Arabia to Turkey. So I went to, Sultan Ahmet, the Blue Mosque, the Hagia Sophia, and all of those things, cultural locations. I wanted to learn cultural things. I didn't want to spend my time learning Arabic because I had been frustrated with Korean, because Korean and English are so vastly different. I didn't want to expend that much energy in a futile endeavor. I said, this isn't gonna work. So even when I was in Saudi Arabia, I was studying Spanish. Shout out to Rocio, my Spanish teacher from Peru. She translated my poem for me, but so Turkey. Then after Turkey, it was, okay, you're in Saudi Arabia, but you're so close to Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, Oman. So those became weekend trips for me. Fly there, an hour trip, an hour's flight, $200 round trip, maybe something like this. So I took small trips on the weekends. When Ramadan arrived, we had full weeks. When Ramadan arrived, I planned a South American trip. So I did pay more to fly back to America, but I had 6 weeks. It's Ramadan now. And I came back to Los Angeles, where we are now, saw my family, and then I went to Mexico, Cuba, Panama, Peru, because I had to do it. I had the money, I had the means. It was make it. So my point is, one point that I want to make is, my mother especially told me, if you can conceive it, you can achieve it. And when I went to college, I studied something that I wasn't prepared to study, because I believed if I conceive it, if I believe that I can do it, I can achieve it. But I found that I was in the wrong field. I shouldn't have put myself through the ringer, through the gauntlet like that. I was retaking courses in math because I wasn't proficient. I had to struggle with this subject. English is where I should have been. I should have taken the path of least resistance, English, because it probably would have served me better as an English teacher later in life. Of course, I didn't want that, but here I am today.
Life and all its irony. But so you spent 2 weeks in Peru during your time in South Korea, and then I heard you just say that you did a whole South American tour and you ended up back in Peru. Did you have an opportunity to reconnect with people that you met the first time that you were there?
Yes. Well, I was there for 2 weeks as a teacher trainer. So with the folks, the teachers, the adult teachers I met, I'm still in contact with them via Facebook, or as they call it in Peru, Face. I've maintained communication with so many of my the teacher trainers as well, at least on Facebook. And in 2015, because we were only there for 2 weeks, I didn't have the opportunity to travel to Machu Picchu, which is on my shirt. It was a desire. I did have the desire to go to Machu Picchu, and I got the opportunity 2 years later when I was now living in Saudi Arabia, which is when I planned that whole trip. Mm-hmm. So when I got back to South America, specifically Peru, I contacted Karina, who was she was a support staff with the teacher trainers, and she and I went to Cañete, which is in Carmen, which is the Afro-Peruano comunidad. Mm-hmm. And I needed a guide. I needed a local to latch on to. Shout out to Karina. Shout out to Steph Ventura is a YouTuber, and I watched Steph's videos on Peru to learn more. On my second trip, no. On my first trip, I learned about Peru from watching Steph's videos. contacted Steph on my second trip to Peru, and she and I took trips to Carmen, the Afro-Peruvian community, and then let's see, Kimberly is a sister who also worked in Korea, who we met through the organization Brothers and Sisters of South Korea. And Kimberly is a world traveler. She's fluent in Spanish, and she was in Peru at the same time that I was there. In fact, we were in Cusco at the same time. So Kimberly and I met up. So I had someone to at least feel comfortable with, you know, share culture, share experiences. And then Tigo's in San Diego. So it was Tigo, Kimberly, and I, and we were in Peru together. We briefly met, we had lunch, said hi and bye, and then we were off to on our ways. But that, at least meeting like that, gave us encouragement. So as far as the Peruvians that I met, I interacted with a few people here and there. I went to their language school while I was there. I went to two. I went to the language school in Cusco for 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, I think 1 or 2 weeks. And then also in Lima, I went to their language school. So remember, it was a Ramadan period. I spent the bulk of my period in Peru. I think 2 weeks in Cusco, went to Machu Picchu, studied Spanish, and took a salsa lesson there. So very much a cultural adventure. I was trying to improve my Spanish, my salsa. I was trying to improve my salsa. I was trying to, and this is as a solo traveler. I know that there were opportunities for students to join groups, join organizations that would provide opportunities to travel, where you would get the Spanish experience. But for whatever reason, I didn't have access to that. You have to meet the criteria to be in that group. Your GPA has to be a certain, thing. You have to be of a certain age. You have to be a certain grade level, all of that. I was taking these opportunities to be mine because I knew that they were enriching. Plus, I love salsa, and I thought, hey, I could do that. So salsa, and I had Richard Finch, a South African man. His history is phenomenal. South African man, I met him. He was one of my teacher trainers. He's wearing a green and gold Brazilian colored T-shirt with Africa, the map of Africa on it. And he's a lighter complected man, and I'm wondering, what's his story? This is a lighter complected man who could potentially pass, Why does he embrace Africa? What's his story? And his thing was, I'm black, Larry. Never mind, how I may look. Know my history, look at my life. You will see I am a black man. I represent Africa. I live it. I am African. His father and his story is one that I'm familiar with. I'm ignorant of right now, but it's a beautiful story. And he welcomed me. He said, Larry, we're going to watch a cultural dance, a Peruvian cultural dance at the auditorium. Come with us. He just knew me as a teacher trainer there for a short, brief time. And he said, we're going. Would you like to join us? I said, sure. Cultural dance, wonderful. I had the most amazing night. I saw rich Peruvian culture like I had never seen before, presented to us. And I'm grateful. I'm appreciative to Richard for inviting me. And so he still has an invitation out for me to visit South Africa. He has a guest house. He's come,
Oh, where in South Africa? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I have his information. If anyone would like to visit a beautiful South African guest house resort, contact me. You know, I can share the information, or I'll put it on this video. So I just met some wonderful people along my travels, and they were supportive, and they were inspiring, and oftentimes like-minded. So, but Peru, 2015 was a year of learning for me. You can travel the world. You can go forth. And then Peru, to juxtapose the cultures, in Korea, there isn't much touching. You stand apart. Now this is pre-COVID. You don't touch, you bow. Handshakes, that's a Western introduction. So I was warmly received in Peru when I arrived, with hugs and kisses on both cheeks. And it was like, this is different. Strangers. I mean, these were my students. They were adults, but they were saying, come teacher, embrace. This is how we greet each other. And I was blown away. Also because the African presence in Peruvian culture was not ignored. It was embraced. That's what the dance, that's what that whole, that night with Richard at that auditorium, seeing that dance presentation, the Peruvians had these black masks, dark, I don't know, obsidian masks, black faces, representative of some kings or some, aristocracy or someone, important. And I said, whoa, if I were in Los Angeles watching a presentation, it would be a white face, I imagine. I presume it would be.
Right.
White supremacy is real.
Okay.
Because not many representations of not many representations of the connection that humans have to Africa, is presented, or is the undergirding of so many philosophies. It's something else. We learned that 500 years ago, the world started when Europe discovered this land that we're on. But we have a history of tens of thousands, 10,000s plus years, and other histories that go ignored. Now, let's just talk about, do this for a second. Forget the fact that 10,000 years ago, there were people here, and those people encountered Black Africans at some point, through their journeys before Columbus. But what about all of the Black men and women who have lived in California, who have, whose legacies we experience today? Paul Revere Williams. Thousands of locations around Los Angeles were designed by this Black architect. We don't know that. We're not taught that in schools. We have to discover that history. How many of us right here in California know that in 1846, the Bear Flag Revolt that 39 men were a part of, that 7 of those men were Black men at that time. That the California flag, the state flag that we have, the red paint, the paint, the bear and the star in red, that red paint was acquired by the Black men who were a part of the Bear Flag Revolt. It might not be an important detail to some, but the fact that we were there, the fact that we contributed and were able to procure that paint is the reason why the flag that we have today exists. We have countless, Tom Bradley, the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass today, the first woman mayor, but Tom Bradley, the first Black man to be a mayor. We've got, Magic Johnson, owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers. But before, Magic Johnson is a million or a billionaire, in our time, but well before him, There was Biddy Mason, who was the philanthropist, businesswoman, and entrepreneur who was bilingual. She spoke Spanish fluently, and she was a success in her time. I have never heard anyone mention Biddy Mason in a classroom throughout all of my years of education. That's the history of this place that we're in right now. Ask me about some European authors, some American literary figures. Ask me, and I can rattle their names off. Whether I read their works or not, I can tell you, yes, I know something about them. And it's a shame. Even when I was abroad, I met a gentleman from Ireland. I knew some of the Irish authors, and he didn't even know. So what I'm saying is, I was well versed in the world's culture, sans Africa. I didn't know anything about Africa. I knew about Europe, okay? And I got the education right here in California. But also I didn't have an education about the rich black history of the men and women, you know, right here, who have impacted, who have had an effect. Now, the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party for self-defense. I would like to think of myself as a Black Panther. When I was a kid, my classmate was the son of a Black Panther. Masai Hewitt, Edo Soriano Hewitt, is a friend from elementary school throughout life. We're still friends to this day. So that was the first friend or acquaintance I knew who had a connection to the Black Panthers. I had no idea what the Panthers were at that time, but if you see WIC is a program that provides services for women without means to provide for their children. Mm-hmm. That whole program is an outbirth of the Panther Party, the Panther movement, from my understanding of history. We have today at this school, breakfast is provided for the students. When I was in school, breakfast wasn't provided. We had to carry money or carry our own lunches to school. I think that is a direct correlation, an outbirth of the Black Panther Party, who created the free breakfast program. If it's not directly linked, it is within the same tradition of we need to provide for students or we need to provide food because a healthy stomach leads to a healthy mind. Something you have to you can't be focused on your food. You can't be hungry in a classroom. So I think that's an outgrowth. But I'm bringing up the Black Panther Party because I worked alongside a Black Panther when I was in Saudi Arabia. I worked alongside the son of Eldridge Cleaver and Kathleen Cleaver. He passed away in 2018. His name was Ahmad Maceo Eldridge Cleaver. I became friends with him. I admired him because of his lineage. I said, man, I know who your mother and father are. I know what they meant to the Black Panther Party. And so that shocked me that I was working alongside him because he attended Columbia University. No, I think Cornell. I messed up. I don't know if it's Cornell or Columbia. I think it might be Cornell. I think that's an Ivy League. That's a private. It's certainly a private. Well, maybe I'm wrong there too. I don't know. My impression of the school that he attended, I think it was Cornell, is brilliant minds, go there and come out of there. And here I was next to him. I didn't think that I was of the same caliber, but there I was working alongside him. That said to me, as Black men, we have few options. We have few opportunities. I never saw myself as a teacher, but there I was. I had matriculated through the job market. I built my resume, so now I'm standing toe to toe with a black man who went to Cornell, who's doing the same work that I'm doing in this foreign land. They looked at us equally. I was surprised. Many of my colleagues, even today, I know a guy, Jay Smallwood, and he went to Oxford recently. He's in England right now. Mm-hmm. The caliber of of my colleagues was just, it was surprising. It was impressive. And they're little old me. There I was with these folks. Anyhow.
Tell me about your favorite place, most favorite place you visited.
Ethiopia and Cuba.
Why? Cuba
because of the history, because we were not allowed to travel to, as Americans, we were forbidden without a visa, proper visa, until Obama was in office. Cuba because the history of America was present. I could feel it, I could see it. I went to the museum and I saw the treasures, I saw the coins, I saw the silver coins that Columbus or whomever coveted and what they were after. I saw their riches, and seeing that was like, oh, so this is what they were looking for. If you see it in books, if it's outside, it's not real. But when you're looking at that treasure, this is what they valued, what they coveted. Oh, it drives it home. Oh, okay, I see what they were fighting for, what they were killing for. And then the revolution, the Cuban Revolution, to see socialism, to see a socialist nation operate the way that it did. The devastation of the American blockade, against the Cubans. I was surprised to see a box of goods that did say "Made in America" in Cuba. So I thought, they're not really blocked, are they? Some things do get there from America. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And why Ethiopia?
Because when I went to Ethiopia, first off, I was suggested to, my colleagues, my white male colleagues told me that Ethiopia was a great country to visit. And I was angered that these white men would tell me about an African nation, about the power, the rich history, the culture, the beauty that they had seen, that I, as a black man who has perhaps greater connection to that land, hadn't. They had more access to it based upon their experiences. They had seen it before me. They had traveled there numerous times. And here I am saying, what is Ethiopia? My only introduction to Ethiopia right here in Los Angeles was through Sally Struthers, a white blonde-haired actress who told me in the 1980s, told millions of Americans that Ethiopians were starving. It was true, but I learned about Ethiopia through her frame of reference.
Mm-hmm. Where would you go back to?
I would absolutely go back to Ethiopia and Cuba. Japan. I would go back to the countries where I didn't have, where I wasn't robbed. There's something to that. I've been in many countries and I've been scammed out of $100 here, $200, $600, for various reasons and various circumstances. And shockingly, Ethiopia was one of them. I was lured to a home where a young man said that it's going to be a club, a nice club environment. You're a young man, you should come and hang out. 20 minutes later, I decided I didn't want to be there. And he said, oh, for visiting the club, you owe me $150. Like, oh, okay, I see. Never trust anyone when I travel. Okay, I won't do that again. But why Ethiopia? These men told me to go. I was angered by that. Mm-hmm. But I was also fascinated with Ethiopia because I had watched Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s documentaries. Now, he knew about Ethiopia 30 years before I did and even traveled and made documentaries on those places. So now, when I was in Saudi Arabia, I had the money, I had the time, I had the desire, and I had the curiosity. So I said, I'm going to take the tour that my white colleagues have told me about, And wonderfully, what's wonderful about that tour is that I'm going to go to all of those locations that Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. went to. And that was so impressive. It was unbelievably impressive that for what Saudi Arabia taught me, to be comfortable with yourself in your appearance, you know, that was one thing. But Ethiopia told me, be comfortable in your faith. Ethiopia said to me, we are the oldest Orthodox Christian faith nation. We are the oldest. Learn about us before you learn, or before you jump ship and learn any other faith. You were born into this faith. Learn how deep it goes. Because there is value in all faiths. Because the faiths basically teach you the same thing. So that was profound. And so my point is, there was tremendous value in my travel, because it shaped my reality. It shaped my worldview. It let me know that that no one knows everything, that I could never learn everything, and that the value that I have is in the interaction with folk, in the present. Okay. So being here at this school, I have the opportunity to share my experiences and to share my world view, share my experiences, and that wasn't my plan. None of my travels were quote unquote planned. I found that I was working in Saudi Arabia after South Korea, and I found that I could access these countries easily, so I did it. I took leaps of faith every time I boarded a plane and I went to these locations. And I was enriched. I was rewarded with the knowledge of the food, the culture, the language, the geography, and history came to life for me. I was standing where they said, this is where the war took place. In Ethiopia, I visited the Red Museum. They have the bones, the skulls of the people who were murdered, massacred at that time in cases, each person their skull. That was a jarring experience, very scary. I've never seen anything that real. You're looking at a person who was alive 30 years ago but was murdered in the streets of Ethiopia. You're looking at their ID card, maybe a shard of a piece of their clothing, and you're looking at their bones, their femur, tibia, their skull, the mandible. Yeah.
So taking what you know now, if you had an opportunity to do this all over again, what would you do differently?
Maybe start sooner. Because my sister began traveling much younger. Her first flight was maybe at 8 years old or something. And that was a solo travel. That was a solo trip from Los Angeles to Vegas, I think. Something very, very young. But my first international trip was at the age of 27. You see, there's a great deal of arrogance that I had, that students have. When you believe that everyone is like you or everyone thinks like you, you become complacent. They know what I'm thinking. They know what it's about. No one knows. Okay? Or rather, everyone within this immediate vicinity knows what you're talking about. But go outside there's a different culture. There's a different way of doing things. And we have to be humble enough to accept the way that they do it and see it as this is another expression of our humanity. it takes courage to go outside of one's, comfort zone, of course. But there's such a reward, such great rewards in doing so. I would like to have gone earlier. And with Spanish, that's the biggest thing. Like I should be fluent in Spanish. I'm like, my dad, you should have sent me to, Mexico. I have, our Mexicanity should have been embraced earlier. Let me see. Let's see. I have an aunt who's from Ecuador. I have another aunt who's from Puerto Rico. I have a full-blooded cousin who's from Puerto Rico, but they live so far away that our interaction was limited. And outside of these two connections to the Spanish language, in between there was no access to the language. But we were learning it in school, kind of butting our heads against this because we weren't, it didn't come naturally, I didn't see the value in the language as a young learner until later on. So starting travel, you see, the thing about it is to have money, to have access. The one thing that is probably the most valuable is travel. So if you talk with people who are rich, they're flying somewhere, they're going off here, they're going off there, all right? And they're having experiences. Felicia Rashad, the Claire Huxtable from The Cosby Show. I met her once. I shook her hand. She's the only Black celebrity whom I've ever heard talk about the country of Oman. Everyone I've talked with, no one has ever heard of this country, but she talked about it. And I had the pleasure, I had the honor, the privilege of living there. Of course, it was for work. But when she talked about Oman, she went on about, in her way, of her style and of her grace. She just went on saying it's a wonderful country, the people, the culture, beautiful, and then, how eloquently she speaks.
Separate from humanity at all. Yeah, I know better. Mm-hmm. I know better. And I've been privileged to be in the company of historians who have reached into world culture and the presence of Black people throughout the world in antiquity, and to have traveled to Oman, and to have traveled to India, and to have traveled to Australia, to have traveled to Brazil, to have traveled to Mexico, to have traveled places in which Black people have been present. In Switzerland, St. Moritz. Mm-hmm. St. Moritz was a Black man.
I had no idea.
He was. He was not only Black, he was African. Okay, let's just talk about it for a minute. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like open up and realize it's not just the transatlantic slave trade. That's not the summum bonum of our history as people. Mm-hmm. It is not. Unfortunately, it's part of our history in this country. But as people, our history is much, much broader than that.
Queen,
much broader.
I agree. Did you ever lose yourself playing such a iconic role as Claire?
She's the only person I've ever heard, talk about it. But so there's that access. There's that access, and travel, broadens your horizons. And so for that reason, if you are stuck where you are, you're limited. The foods you eat limit you. The ideals that you think of other people, are limited. Your ideal of another person is limited to your interaction with that person. For me, it's not only my interaction with them, but it's also what I can see, knowing what their country looks like after having been there. I see their history, I see their past. I know perhaps their political situation. I know what they are dealing with as a person right here in Los Angeles, because I know Los Angeles, but I also know Guatemala from the history. I haven't been to Guatemala yet. Peru, Cuba, I've been there. So I can see people beyond what I see. Even the Ethiopian students here. I shared an Ethiopian lesson with the young boy. He was so far removed from his own country. I shared a book that allowed him to practice his Amharic script. He said, "Thank you." I said, "Right on, man."
Cool. Well, okay. I gotta get to work. So
You didn't talk as much.
I think, thoughts is powerful in all facets. Because even my career, even my life, things end up turning out exactly how I visualized them. Not in this time frame I expected. You know what I'm saying? You always want shit to happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
But, I just had clear visions.
October 9th,
Yes, sir.
that's where it starts.
You're at 109 right now.